This is the demonstration for how to color something using watercolor. If you can see, I've already put a base tone down for two of my colors here. I want this to end up green in the end, and I want this to end up red in the end. So whatever color you want it to end up is the color that you need to use for the base tone. So if you want something to be green, you start with yellow. If you want something to be orange, you start with yellow. If you want something to be red, you start with orange, and so forth. You can actually use your color pencil cheat sheets to do this technique, only using the fill color as an undercolor. The reason for this is because with watercolor, as you put colors down, they're going to pick up the color that's underneath them. It almost acts as if it's layers of colored glass, where looking down upon it, the light goes through the paint, hits the paper, and bounces back out and hits your eye. So the more layers of color you use, the richer it's going to become. Now what I'm doing here is my light source I'm going to have coming from this direction. So this stuff is going to be fairly darker. I do want this to appear as if it's an orange object. So I'm actually going to make the whole thing orange over top of the yellow and just leave a little bit of yellow showing over here where the light source is. Just filling this in. The less water you use, the darker the color will be. So if you want something to be a lighter color, just use a little bit more water. So I'm just laying in this orange here. And generally what you're going to want to do is go around the edges of your objects first, because that makes like a little fence so you don't go past it. So I've got this all filled in with orange now. And now while that's drying, I'm going to go over to the other side and start thinking about my reds. So I put a base tone of orange down first. Now what I'm going to do is, since I've got some lines on this object, I'm going to paint those first with my red. And thinking about my light source, this part's going to be lighter. And then as it gets over to this side, it's going to lighten up a bit, so I'm going to use a little bit less color and just kind of blend it out using the water. Once again, starting at the line here, come across. Then I'm going to fill it in after I get that line there. You guys see that this bled a little bit, so I have to blend that out while it's still wet. Okay. Bringing the red in over top, the orange. Now red by itself would make a totally different color. See how it ends up a little bit more pink? If you just put it on there by itself. So we always want to put that color underneath it first. I'm going to use just a little bit of water to blend out some of my brush strokes here while it's drying. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to do deep shadows and lines. Okay, now that the paint is dry, I'm going to come back and start doing some of my line work and some of my deep shadows. It's imperative that you let the paint dry before you do this, because that's the only way you're going to end up with clean lines. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just reinforce my lines so I don't see my pencil lines show through. And I'm going to do this on this side. Remember, I want this to be orange, so I'm going to do it in red first. This area is going to be a little bit more heavily shadowed, so I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. And see how nice and pretty this looks with the 3 layers of color that I have in here now. So I have yellow and then orange over top of the yellow and then red over top of the orange. I'm going to bring in a dark shadow on this side here, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go along this edge of this line that I made. Just like this. And now I'm going to start bringing this into the orange and blending it in so it's not a defined line, so it just looks like a shadow there. And we do that by adding a little water to it or just letting the color kind of bleed out. Put a shadow along this edge too. Like that. And kind of reinforce my edge here too. And just because I really hate pencil lines, I'm going to come in and give myself a nice line on the edge of this. Just like so. See how it looks like a nice 3-dimensional object? It's not just flat. And I'm going to blend this line out just a little bit so it looks less like a line. Just going back and forth. Now whenever you re-wet watercolors, it's going to reactivate the paint, so just understand that. Now with the red side, for the deep shadows, I'm going to do something a little bit less conventional. I'm going to mix a little bit of red and purple together. You always want to have a piece of scrap paper so you can test your color out. Looks pretty good, so I'm going to bring that in. And you see how the purple kind of goes over the red but makes it end up looking like a darker red because it's picking up the red and the orange from underneath. So I'm going to use that to kind of reinforce this line here and give myself a deep shadow on this side. Once again, testing it over here. It looks a little too purple, so I'm going to get some red involved. Just kind of mix it there. Right there on your piece of scrap paper, you can mix your colors if you need to. Obviously you won't want to mix your colors right on your art like I've just done, but have a piece of sketch paper or something handy. Use a little bit of red here, reinforce this line. And I'm going to come in here and blend this out because it's drippy. Don't want to leave those drips. Neatness is important. Alright, so there we have that process. And I will make you all cheat sheets to tell you what colors go with which, etc.